Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Forest Service Talks. My name is Paul Strong, and I'm the Director of the Environmental Planning and Stewardship Staff Area for the Eastern Region. Before we go any further, a few reminders. We're recording this session, and that recording has actually already started. It will be posted on the Eastern Region Hub in the next few days. Please be sure your mics are muted from this point forward, unless you're called on for a question later in the hour. If you're having trouble hearing our speaker, me or the speaker, consider enabling closed captions. And that can be found depending on how your Teams is organized, either in a little box in the lower right-hand corner with the letter CC in it, or you can go to the More buttons at the top of the page. You see three little buttons, drop-down menu there. There's a, you look at it here, a language and speech option, and you can turn on closed captioning there. If that doesn't work, try leaving and re-entering the meeting. That may resolve any technical issues that you're having. If you have a question for our guest speaker, please go ahead and post it in the chat at any time. We'll have plenty of opportunities after the presentation for questions and answers and dialogue, and I'll facilitate that. I'm really pleased to facilitate this morning's edition of FS Talks, sponsored by the Eastern Region, this one with a focus on artificial intelligence and its use in forestry. I have to admit that I have not closely followed the development of what we have come to call artificial intelligence. For me, at least, like 3D printing and cryptocurrency, I've only had a vague notion of how AI works, what it can do currently, and what it might be able to do in the future. Over this past weekend, I happened to watch an episode of the PBS NewsHour broadcast that reported on the use of AI by health insurance companies to quickly evaluate claims and, based on algorithms, either accept those claims or deny many other claims without human evaluation of that process. And that was creating a bit of controversy and concern, as you might expect. Some of you may have also followed last week's popular news stories about concerns from well-known people like Elon Musk that we should fear the rise of artificial intelligence and that it should be regulated. Well, those news stories and the need to provide a few opening remarks for this session caused me to read a little bit about AI. And I learned a handful of things. One is it's not brand new. Alan Turing on the right in the slide on your screen now, the British mathematician who's most well known for helping to break the code enigma that the Nazis used during World War II. He was the one who actually proposed the concept of artificial intelligence. And you may have watched the movie Imitation Man, in which he was portrayed by the famous actor Benedict Cumberbatch. And the term artificial intelligence wasn't actually coined until a few years after that by an American computer scientist. Second, I learned that AI is developing faster than we think, and it's already in broad use. Third, I realized that some segments of society are really quite concerned about the potential uses and effect of AI, but other segments of society not so much. It does remind me of the moral and ethical debates about cloning animals and possibly humans that were occurring in the 1990s. Does anybody remember Dolly the cloned sheep in 1996 and the harangue around that? Fourth, like a changing environmental climate, the expanding use of genetic engineering and other phenomena of our time, artificial intelligence, it's happening now, and it's expanding and evolving very quickly. And lastly, it's not just in the Silicon Valley or the boardrooms of companies. It's made its way into the universe of work that we do with forests and other natural resources. This morning, we're very pleased to have Dr. Jingjing Liang from Purdue University to speak to us about one aspect of AI being used in forestry. I first became aware of Dr. Liang and his work when he was a PhD student at the University of Madison in the early 2000s. He's had a robust body of research work in forest inventory, forest simulation models, and biological diversity. You might wonder about the value of this research to the day-to-day work we do in managing national forests in the tallgrass prairie at Medawin, or providing technical assistance to states, tribes, and private forest landowners. One of Dr. Liang's publications from 2016 used forest inventory information and simulation modeling to predict the results of climate change and the absence of historic fire regimes on the central hardwoods ecoregion. And I think, as all of you know, this is the most extensive temperate deciduous forest in the entire world. And those models predicted a dramatic shift from oak hickory dominated forest to ones dominated by red maple, and associated losses in biological diversity and forest productivity for desired wood products, significantly altering ecological and economic futures. And in a world with uncertain futures, this kind of research can help us plan around potential outcomes and start taking actions today to mitigate undesirable effects. Dr. Liang is co-director of the Forest Advanced Computing and Artificial Intelligence Lab at Purdue University. He's the founder and chief science officer of Science Eye, a transparent metaverse for global research collaboration. He also co-founded Global Forest Biodiversity Initiative, an international multi-stakeholder team of foresters and forest scientists that supports cutting-edge research and policymaking in forest science and related areas. He's a certified forester, enjoys having a boots-on-the-ground experience leading forest inventories in Alaska boreal forests and central hardwood forests. He's the leading author of research articles published in top journals such as Science, Nature, and Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences of the United States of America. His research interests are in global biodiversity patterns, associated environmental and anthropogenic drivers, and he approaches this by using machine learning and big data to help unravel the pressing issues facing the field today. And while he's working on answering today's tough questions, he believes the future success of this field will depend heavily on international collaborations and leveraging artificial intelligence to produce high-impact research. Today, he's going to share his recent work leading a project that's using AI to map global forests, along with a first-of-its-kind estimate of the total number of tree species to show how technology is shaping conservation work around the world. Please welcome Dr. Liang. Thank you so much for joining us this morning on FS Talks. I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Let me share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. And it's my pleasure to be here and glad to see everyone. Thanks a lot for the good introduction, Paul. And so today I'm going to talk about the future of AI in natural resource management with a focus on my self-learning forest growth model.
Hey, Dr. Liang, before you go on, we were getting a lot of background noise there. It's disappeared now. Go ahead, but something was happening.
Oh,
go ahead and please proceed. It's better now, it sounds like.
Great. Okay, so please feel free to stop me if there's any more noise. Okay, so when we talk about AI, the first million-dollar question is, what is AI? Okay, there are different definitions, and it may differ from place to place, from company to company. For example, Google may have a different definition of AI from I don't know, other companies. And however, here I'm using two typical definitions of AI. So one is in terms of human-defined artificial intelligence, according to Wikipedia. It is a process of perceiving, synthesizing, and inferring information as demonstrated by machines. Now, according to AI, so what is the definition of AI? In simple terms, AI can be thought of as teaching machines to think and act like humans, allowing them to perform complex tasks with speed and accuracy. So this is according to ChatGPT. Okay, so in the eyes of a lay person, so AI may sound like something very complicated, very fancy. So in a typical drawing, so it is like a robot doing all sorts of mathematical equations, and commonly human beings cannot understand. And however, actually, in the eyes of AI, it is quite simple. You know, it's a matter of single algorithm, which is a procedure used for solving problem. So this is a typical diagram, an algorithm that I demonstrated in every single one of my AI-related class. I show my students. So this simple algorithm of how I decide to go to school, to go to work every day. So if I, for example, if I visit a new place, or if I go to a new type of work, and how I decide to work, and I just follow this simple algorithm. Do you live in the walking distance, you know, from your workplace? And if so, then you walk. And however, if you live further away, then you have to use other criteria to help you choose whether to drive or to use public transportation or to ride your bicycle, so on and on. So in the eyes of AI, you know, artificial intelligence is just a simple matter of, you know, following a procedure that human used for solving a problem. And there are different types of AI. And so one of them is called machine learning. It is a study of computer algorithms that improve automatically through experience. And so we use machine learning a lot in processing big data. And the second type of AI is called machine perception or perception, which is the ability to use input from sensors, for example, such as cameras, microphones, and LiDAR, sonar, radar, or you know, different other sensors to deduce aspects of the world. And so we're doing a lot of work using, for example, interpreting remote sensing data. And then the third type is called reasoning. So it is a matter of solving puzzles and make logical deductions. So for example, AlphaGo, which is a AI agent developed by the DeepMind technology, a subsidiary company of Google now. So it is the first software that defeats the world's top Go player, the Go game player, Lee So-do in Korea, which was actually quite a large news back several years ago. And then in addition to reasoning, we also have knowledge engineering, and which allows AI programs to answer questions intelligently and make deductions about the real world facts. So for example, we know a lot like ChatGPT, and also the matrix growth models that I'm going to talk today can be put as this part of knowledge engineering. But one thing I'd like to mention is that those different types, they are not mutually exclusive. So for example, lots of computer programs like AlphaGo, like matrix model and the ChatGPT, they are also using machine learning models, and sometimes they have sensor data built inside it. So they are not mutually exclusive, and so that's why we call them different trees of AI instead of types. And now I'm going to introduce the AI applications of my lab in those different trees. So my lab, called Forest Advanced Computing and Artificial Intelligence, we use applications in different areas, in different trees in forestry. So first, we have used machine learning to help us detect the trend behind large data or big data. So back in 2016, we compiled global forest inventory data from 750,000 plots, permanent sample plots across the world. And we detected that there is a positive concave down relationship between biodiversity or forest tree species diversity and the productivity of forest around the world. And which actually means that with the declining of biodiversity across the world, our forest productivity is likely going to decline as well. And following the same type of ground source data, and in 2018, we are we investigated the relationship of different forest tree species with the type of mycorrhizal fungi that are associated with all those different species, and we were able to map this global forest tree symbiosis across the world. And the outcome was published in Nature that year. And more recently, we are using, again, the much abbreviated global forest inventory database, now consisting about 1.3 million sample plots. And we are using those data to investigate the total number of tree species on Earth. And actually, one of the approach we used here is very much related to Alan Turing, as Paul introduced earlier. So Alan Turing, during his work in World War II, he developed this algorithm that basically says that it's a theorem that says basically the rare signals is only represented by the amount of rare signals we already have. So that translated into forest biodiversity studies is that in order to study rare species, we have to find more information about the existing rare species that we know. So using this type of knowledge and machine learning, we were able to get an educated guess of there are about 73,000 tree species on Earth. And so far, we have documented only about 60,000, which means that actually there are 13,000 tree species that are yet unknown to us. And as forest degradation and deforestation are going around the world, especially in the tropical part of the world, so many of the species, we may never likely going to document them before they disappear once for all from the Earth. And in another trait of AI application in forestry, which is related to perception, we are using basically artificial intelligence to help us understand better the forest conditions across the world. So for example, in East Asia, in terms of forest stocking, forest basal area, and its carbon storage, we think we know relatively well about the situation in South Korea, and we also know quite a lot about the situation in northeastern China. However, what we do not know is in North Korea, what's going on in there. And so in this particular study, we used forest inventory data from northeastern China, as well as the forest inventory data from South Korea. And together, we also used the remote sensing data that covering the whole region. And we were able to map out with accuracy the local levels of forest carbon storage, forest stocking, as well as forest species and size diversity in the whole region, including northeastern China, South Korea, and North Korea. And our finding was published in Global Change Biology. And more recently, we are also using the same type of the AI model, mostly deep learning, and we are using that model to detect the location of planted forest in East Asia. So in the paragraphs in the figures to the right, we were using basically the ground source data as well as remote sensing data. In South Korea, namely this small island called Jeju Island, we trained the computer to detect the planted forest in Jeju Island. And then we upscale it to the whole South Korea and North Korea. And then we will use a machine learning model in combination of deep learning model to map out the planted forest in the whole Eastern Asia, including the country of China, North Korea, South Korea, and Japan as well. And here I'm also going to give you some other forestry applications of AI with some examples. So for example, the Global Forest Watch and as well as the Global Forest Monitoring Project, they are using machine learning model to give us a live update of forest cover change across the world. And also, in terms of AI-assisted forest inventory here, and for example, Purdue, we have the digital forestry, and also some other companies are making similar progress as well to use these different devices, the sensors, and to help people do a faster forest inventory. And also here at Purdue, people are using artificial intelligence to study synthetic field image. And so traditionally, field image can be quite expensive to obtain, but using AI is becoming quite faster and a lot less expensive to do so. And also different groups are studying using AI, for example, the COVID-19 pandemic prediction, as well as Alzheimer's disease prediction. And all those are done by the AI. So now I'm going to come back to talk about this new artificial intelligence agent in forestry that I'm going to develop, which is called the matrix model. So the big question behind this basically artificial intelligence-based growth models is that there is a strong demand for a globally consistent and a locally relevant tool to project the future forest states and yield, and what we call the forest growth models. Okay, and in reality, we have thousands, if not more, forest growth models that have been developed across the world. However, one thing that we have to know is that over a half of the developing countries, they do not even have a single forest growth models developed for their local forest. And even the existing forest growth models, they differ a lot in scale, in attributes, and in quality. And therefore, they are not compatible, and they are not consistent for large-scale applications. So for example, here in the US, we have different types of forest models. And also in Canada, they have their own different forest models. And in Mexico, there are different types of forest growth models. So how can we study, for example, the growth and yield of forest across the whole North America when all those models are developed differently and inconsistent? So that's a big question. And then finally, last but not least, developing and maintaining forest growth models, they are very costly. Okay, they cost a lot of money, and they also cost a lot of people, human resources as well. So with those questions and problems in mind, we are going to develop the first artificial intelligence-based forest growth model that I call the matrix. And this model projects the dynamics of forest tree population structure, and it is going to be used to map global forest carbon accumulation rates with precision. And once this model is online, the matrix will automatically update and upscale itself based on the new forest inventory data. And so for some of the developing countries, such as Liberia, such as the Ivory Coast, and many other developing countries, the matrix model will provide their first ever local forest growth models for the management applications, as well as forest conservation and restoration applications. So the matrix model is based on traditional or the non-artificial intelligence matrix transition models of ecological populations, and those are originated during the 1940s. So different scientists, they developed this transition matrix models for different ecological populations, for example, the fish, the animals. And my advisor, Dr. Joseph Bongiorno, was among one of the first people who are using the forest transition models to study forest tree populations. And the matrix transition model is a type of standard level model, which can be aggregated to predict larger geographic scales with high accuracy. For example, at the landscape level, the regional level, national level, or even the continental and global levels. So we are going to use this model to predict the number of trees by species and size classes, and which can be readily integrated to project the dynamics of carbon, for example, the biodiversity, stand quality, and the financial income as well. So first, I'm going to give you a little bit background of the matrix model. So this matrix model is going to predict the stand condition, the stand structure in this vector called yt times 1 at s, which represent basically the vector of the number of trees by species and size at year t plus 1 for location s. It can be projected from the number of trees by species and the size at year t at the same location, multiplied by the transition matrix big G, and also the recruitment factor big R. And the transition matrix G can be divided into sub matrices at the diagonal level, the G1, G2, all the way up to Gm. Each one of them represent the transition matrix for one species or one species groups. And for each species group or species, of our GI is consisted of the diagonal elements of AI1, AI2, AI-1, and so on. Those represent the stasis rate or the probability that a tree of a certain species group at a certain dBH class, they are going to stay in the same diameter class in 1 year. And also the subdiagonal element is BI1, BI2, all the way up to BI-1 that represent the upgrowth rate. So the probability that a tree will move up 1 diameter class after 1 year. So those are the structure of the matrix models, quite simple. And there are extensions of matrix models that can accommodate harvesting, planting, as well as the disturbances. So for example, in the harvesting, we can add this vector called HT, which can represent, for example, timber harvest, illegal logging, or even the silviculture thinning. And also we can add another vector PT to represent planting. For example, we can study afforestation, forest restoration, and even the silvicultural planting as well. And finally, we can add this vector of epsilon to represent the natural disturbances, wildland fire, and different types of disturbances. Those are extensions of matrix models. Okay, so now comes the AI revolution. How am I going to make this matrix model a self-learning AI-based forest growth model? So to make the concept easier to understand, please allow me to make an analogy to the Henry Ford, basically the moving assembly line. So in the moving assembly line, Henry Ford revolutionized the automotive industry. So instead of having people moving around and working on each car, this moving assembly line allows the product to move between people to people and thus, save time and increase consistency. So similarly, instead of hiring people to develop different forest growth models for different forest types across the world, our AI-based matrix model is going to learn from biometricians and statisticians who developed forest growth models in the past. And so they are going to, based on this learning as well as the new forest inventory data that becomes more and more available across the world. And this AI agent will be able to automatically upscale and update itself to cover different forest types with no or little human intervention. So as long as the data permits, this matrix model will be able to upscale and update itself to cover the whole world, probably in a matter of a few weeks to 1 or 2 months of computing time. And now I'm going to quickly show you basically how this AI-based model is going to work. So in this generation 1 model, I'm using basically the forest inventory data, the forest inventory analysis data from the state of Indiana. I'm going to teach. Actually, I have done so. So I have taught the AI agent how to project the forest growth using the matrix model. And so the next step is that we are going to expand our study region to 14 states, including 3,200 different counties in the Lake States and also northeastern United States. And so in other words, in generation 1 model, we are teaching this AI agent from crawling to be able to walk. And then after we upscale this model, we are going to teach this AI agent to be able to run by itself and to cover the entire study area, much bigger study area. And so after our AI-based forest matrix model is developed, now we are going to basically going to examine how well this model performs. So in order to do that, we did a validation. We conducted a validation study. And in this validation study, we acquired 4,664 independent post-sample forest inventory and analysis plots. And we are using those plots neither used by this AI or other reference models, for comparison. So what we did is that we are using basically the first inventory from those validation plots, and we asked the AI agent to predict how those forests are going to evolve over time, and then we are going to compare the predicted value against the observed value in the second inventory that people, the forest inventory analysis crews, they already did on those validation plots. So here on this figure here, we are actually showing the estimated, the projected versus the observed in terms of the number of trees, the upper figure, and also the lower figure in terms of basal area. So what we can see is that the AI-based forest growth models performs really well. The predicted value is very similar to the projected value, with a very low mean absolute error and also root mean square error. And the R square is well above 90%. And as a reference, we are also comparing this AI-based forest model to the human-developed forest growth model. So in the US, we have forest vegetation simulator, and which is developed by human. And for this validation, we made sure that basically all those 4,664 plus are neither being used by AI nor human-based for FES model. And so, and then we did a projection using FES model. And what we found is that actually this AI-based matrix model is over 50% more accurate than the human-developed forest vegetation simulator. So, I mean, this is only the generation 1 model, and we believe the generation 2, generation 3, they are going to even lead more accurate results. So AI is going to outperform humans even more. So using the AI-based forest growth model, we were able to project how the forest conditions are going to change over time under different climate change scenarios. So for example, here the 3 graphs shows under constant climate, to the upper left, and under RCP 45 in the middle, and RCP 85 in the lower right, how our forest across the whole study region in northeastern US and the lake states, how they are going to change over the next 50 years. And as we can see, under a constant climate change, constant climate scenario, and basically we're going to see a steady decline in forest stocking in the northeastern US as well as the state of Minnesota. However, under RCP 45 and RCP 85, we're going to see more dramatic decline in terms of forest stocking in northeastern and as well as the lake states across the whole region as well. And that's from the projection of the AI-based matrix model. So what we are going to do next is that we are going to upscale and update this matrix model through future generations to make a global coverage. And in order to achieve this, we have been compiling the global remeasured forest inventory data, which we call the GFI 40. And so far, we already have a good coverage of those data in North America, Western Europe, as well as Eastern Asia, and also Oceania. And we are still compiling data from South America, Africa, and Siberia, and China, and India as well. And then the other asset we have to make this this global coverage is our Science Eye, the platform, the metaverse that we have, currently consists of over 350 members that are located across the world, and those members will be able to assist us to train this AI-based forest growth models to perform better and to be more accurate. The other asset we have is basically the Purdue high-performance computing clusters, and which are among the world's top 500 supercomputers. And the speed and the capacity of those computers will ensure that our global coverage will be achieved within the time frame. And so what we are going to do next is that we want to downscale the matrix model for local forest management applications. So the local communities will be able to use those models for harvest scheduling, for thinning, replanting, different forest conservation and forest management purposes. And we are also going to build open access tools, for example, the API, and we are going to allow the easy public access for management, conservation, ecological restoration applications based on the matrix model. And finally, we're going to engage rural communities, indigenous, and other underrepresented and underprivileged communities, and we are allow them for easy human AI interactions. In other words, we are going to actually teach both humans and AI to work better together in order to achieve a better future for humans in tomorrow's challenges. So finally, I would like to acknowledge that this matrix project is sponsored by the World Resources Institute through the Bezos Earth Fund. And we thank over 300 data contributors and other collaborators from 76 countries. And we thank our collaborating organizations, including the United Nations Food and Agricultural Organizations, Global Forest Biodiversity Initiative, ForestPlus.net, and the Central Africa Forest Observatory, and many other agencies. And with that, I thank you very much for your time, and would like to give this to you for if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Liang. That was absolutely fascinating. And as I watched the questions and comments popping into the chat, I can see there are a number of lines of questions that people have. We have about 21 minutes to go, so we're going to use this time judiciously. I'm going to try to synthesize a couple of the comments or questions, and I mean no harm to those who put them in there that may want to follow up with something more specific, but there is a line of questioning around data. the source of the data, the quality of the data, how many data points does an artificial intelligence process need to be able to accurately upscale that data and have something useful come out on the other end. Can you speak a bit? And if you can see the chats, you may want to look at those particular questions about data as well and add anything, Dr. Liang, that you'd like to hear on that subject.
Sure. Yes, thank you very much, Paul, for summarizing those type of questions. So the types of data we are using, I'd like to mention one thing is that for AI, the more data, the better. So for example, some of the things that we see now with ChatGPT, with the different generations of ChatGPT, is that our new generation is much better than the old one. And one of the major reasons is that the recent version are using billions of data and billions of more data than the previous version, and that's why it is able to perform so much better. And similarly, with our AI-based forest matrix model, the more data we have, the better. And so we are in the process now to acquire global forest inventory data, and so far we have about 1.5 million sample plots across the world, and we are acquiring more. And the data qualities and the data consistencies, they differ from country to country. But what we did is that we are using a standard data frame and also a standard procedure to harmonize and standardize all those global forest inventory data so that they can be comparable and they can be relatable from country to country, and for the development of AI-based forest growth model.
Thank you. Before we go on, Dr. Liang, if you could stop sharing your screen by simply Xing out of that. I think people would rather look at you. There we go. Let's get the smarter person who can answer questions larger on the screen than me. Great, thanks for that. I'm going to go to several questions specifically in just a second, but I also see that there's a number of questions, and I had one myself around this idea of forest growth models. What can actually be projected as outputs, what the relevant uses of those might be. As I listened, I think you described that pretty well, but can you talk about any potential either integration or conflict or absorption or replacement or whatever it might be of forest growth models, whether that's Landis, Landfire, you know the names and processes of them, because they are very well used. They're extremely important in projecting, simulating various outcomes, and we may be able to use them even more in the future around, I'll call them programmatic kinds of decisions and evaluations that we need to do.
Yeah, thank you very much, Paul. So we have different types of forest growth models, and they are also at different geographic scales. And I believe, so for example, there are forest growth models that operate at a landscape level. So, for example, the different forest growth models that are mentioned by Paul, and those are, some of them are landscape level models which we can use to study a landscape, but we cannot downscale it to study, for example, at the plot level, at the stand level, or at a tree level, how the forest would grow. And I think those so the basically forest growth model, depending on their scale, they can be upscaled easily, but not downscaled easily. So, for example, for the matrix model, since it's a standard level model, it can be aggregated to study the growth and the dynamics of forest at the landscape level, regional, country, national level to continental, even global level with accuracy. However, the limitation of it is that we do not know at the tree level how each individual tree are going to change over time. So that is one limitation of the matrix model. So we can use it to study, for example, the carbon dynamics, the diversity change, the forest stocking change, and also even the change in timber quality and the financial income, the net present value, all those things. However, we will not be able to see actually for each individual tree what is the future size and whether or not it is going to die 50 years from now. We cannot predict that. So that's a limitation.
Okay, so I think if I'm hearing you correctly, then that we're going to have to use some of these AI developed models in concert with some others, depending on what outcomes we're going to request from them. Very good.
Yes.
Thank you. I'm going to switch gears over to a little bit of nomenclature, particularly for our folks who try to work on what I'm going to call science communication. So there's a question referring to, is AI a model, or is it not a model, or are there models within AI? And I think I know the answer from listening to you, but can you quickly summarize, in a sense, what AI is and how models, different kinds of models, fit within this umbrella of artificial intelligence, the big idea?
Yes, I can try to. So basically, AI contains models. So basically, people develop different models to help teach the machine to think like us, to perform like us, right? And so, however, models is not only what AI do. And so basically, AI is in addition to modeling, it involves perceiving, it involves synthesizing and inferring informations as demonstrated by machines. So we, in addition to develop models, there are different processes and different algorithms that AI follows to kind of think like people and perform like people. So that's I would say that's the relationship between the model and AI. And so to basically summarize, as we are teaching AI similar to what we are trying to teach little kids to perceive the world, to basically to perform, act, and think like what adults are doing. So we are teaching the kids in different ways, right? We are giving them models and models in terms of computer games and really all those model toys, and we are using them to teach them how to do things. But in addition to that, we also reason with them. We also verbally teach them. We are also teach them in action and in different ways. So this AI is so much more than models.
Thank you. That was very understandable to me. I hope it was for everybody else. So I think when I refer back to the PBS NewsHour episode and insurance companies, health insurance companies, either denying or allowing claims to go through, they were using either a simple or complex model with whatever input data came off those claims to make an inferred result. We should either deny the claim, we should accept the claim, right? I mean, that's essentially what you're getting at. Great, thank you. There's a very interesting question at close to the top of the chat from Mark Nelson about how AI applications recognize, address, or quantify artifacts of spatial model transfers when the reference data aren't necessarily representative of all the places and time period. And it gets back at this data question. Can AI recognize and deal with a lack of representative data? I think would be the best way to summarize that question. And Mark, if I've really boggled that up, feel free to come on and state that more clearly.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. And I will try my best to answer this question. So first, for most of the machine learning models as well as AI, it is only as good as the data we feed into it. So that's why we see the data quality has have a lot of impact on the quality of AI. So to this end, making sure that the data has meets a certain standards and are harmonized sufficiently enough is one of the most important way to make sure that this AI agent will be useful. And on the other hand, this how good the AI will perform also depends on how well the human are going to teach it to perform. So to this end, it will depending on human, basically the programmers, and how they are going to improve the algorithm to help this AI better understand basically the inconsistencies and the missing data in the spatial time frame and in the spatial data frame there. So I would say this can be both improved in the programming aspect as well as by improving the data itself.
Great, thank you. There's a line of questioning around this. Rachel Ryman, I see you asking about data artifacts as well and errors. Hopefully Dr. Liang's answer got at your question. And this might be a good place, Dr. Liang. I don't know if you're going to have time after this is over in a few minutes here, but can you possibly answer some of the questions later? Are you potentially interested in so for Dr. Liang's nodding, that's great news. If you may end up with some chats and some questions that for some of us, it would explode our head trying to think it through. But obviously people have some very detailed questions about this. There's another line of questions around just how long is it going to take to perform some of these simulations, I'll call them, these model simulations, once data have been organized, once you've taught the system to do what you want it to do, which sounds like could be a very long process to do that. But once it's in place, if we have a question, I think is a simple way to ask this, how long before we can expect an answer? And of course, the answer depends, but maybe you could give us an example of some of the runtime for certain kinds of applications.
Yes, I would be glad to, Paul. And in my experience, in terms of time that we need to train an AI-based model, it takes the longest time to basically making sure that the data are consistent and meet our standards. And after that, it will take the second longest time to train the AI to understand the data and perform in a way we want it to be. So that in this process, we have different fine-tuning processes in order to make AI better and better. But after that, after the first two processes are done, it only will take a relatively very small amount of time for the AI to do the projection. So once AI understand the task that what we are given it to do, it can perform relatively fast in order to get the task done, depending on the how the quantity of your computing resources and as well as the capacity of your high performance computing systems. It should take a relatively small amount of time.
Great, thank you. So if I understand that correctly, then there's, like a lot of things, there's opportunity cost at the front, but once that opportunity cost has been overcome, if it's a relatively similar question being asked, the computing time really isn't going to be that long.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this leads into a few other questions, and you were getting at this, Dr. Liang, right at the end of your answer, which is when will this be available? Will this be able to be used in government computing systems, or well, since we're working for the government here, in government computing systems, are we going to need to do this with contractors or universities to perform these functions because you have the supercomputers and we don't? What can you tell us about that part?
Yeah, so I would say in terms of the matrix model, our time frame is that we want to make sure that we have the first generation model up and running for the whole wide world within 2 years' time. And after that, we are just going to update and improve this model for local applications. And so I would say so. It is relatively easy to come up with a prototype model, which we call generation one, and that would be online within 1 or 2 years time. And however, much work is needed in order to make this global level model relevant for local applications. So if we want to make it useful and quite accessible by local communities, for example, in rural communities across the US and for different state and county level governmental use, and or even for the applications of individual landowners, I believe that we still have a long way to go. So we need to fine-tune the models and make it able to perform relatively well at a fine scale, at a fine resolution. So to that end, I would say I look forward to work with the Forest Service and with all the people here, to make it useful and available and also accessible to local landowners across the U.S. and across the world as well.
Thank you for that. I'm going to go back to a question that Eric Liliskov from Northern Research Station put in the chat. It's one that I think is on a lot of people's minds. If you could answer that, and then we're getting very close to end time here. If there's somebody who wants to raise their hand and ask a question verbally, by all means do. I hope I hadn't intimated you couldn't do that. It's very late in the show for me to be saying that, but I just realized that some people may want to verbalize that. Anyway, Eric's question was, what are the greatest pitfalls in this approach, and how can those pitfalls be overcome? That's a pretty big question, but take a swing at that one if you could, please.
I would say one of the large potential pitfalls is all those areas that have missing data. So as I showed you, our global forest inventory plot distribution, we still have lots of missing areas, for example, in Central Africa, in Southeast Asia, and also in South America as well. And without any data, how well the AI is going to recognize local patterns and do a good job in predicting, and that is uncertain. So I believe there will be lots of the high level of uncertainties for those areas with a low forest inventory coverage. And so how to improve for those areas, and that is going to be a challenge for this project. And we are trying to acquire more data, and also meanwhile we are also trying to improve the algorithm operated by the AI to make it more accurate.
Thanks very much. Well, we're at 10:58. We could probably go on. I don't see anyone with a hand up here. I really appreciate Dr. Liang's interest and willingness to respond to some or all of the questions that may have been asked by people. My guess is those conversations could go on for quite a while after this meeting. So with that, I think I'm going to try to bring us to a wrap. First, let me remind people that this has been recorded, so you can go back and listen to the presentation, look at the slides, hear the questions asked and answers. The chat will stay alive, I believe, here for a bit as well. Allison, if there's anything we know about the chat being available for a longer period of time, maybe you could put that in the chat and people could see it there. Second, Dr. Liang, can't thank you enough for your willingness to be with us today. Give us a glimpse into the future. A number of our research scientists in particular already were well aware of this, but for a lot of us who work on the management or the state and private side of the Forest Service, this may have been the first time that any of us have heard about artificial intelligence and its applications with forestry. Third, a personal note for me, just thinking about the work we do in forest planning and how important simulation models, I've mentioned this once before, how important they are in helping us think about what the future might bring and how to use them in making some decisions around this. And I think we could have a whole discussion about that at another time. And then, so again, Dr. Liang, thank you so much for your generous time this morning. And then lastly, let me market what FS Talks is about. This is a platform that was developed by several people in the regional office to bring in people external to the work we do on a daily basis and give us some insights to what I'll call frontiers of forestry. And this certainly is one of those frontiers around the technology aspect of conservation. And for a lot of us, we don't think much about that, but it's very clear to me that staying up with technology and the use of that technology in very smart ways is going to assist this noble cause of conservation that many of us pledge our entire careers to. So thanks to all who participated. Again, let's at least have a virtual round of applause for Dr. Liang and his presentation this morning, and look forward to future announcements of more FS Talks episodes. Thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of your day. Thanks again, Dr. Liang. Great to see you.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.